The first warm evening of spring had finally arrived. After months of biting cold and gray skies, the town of Fairbrook smelled of damp earth and blooming cherry blossoms. For 23-year-old Lena, the season always brought renewal, and she was eager to take her first long evening walk of the year. The sidewalks were still slick with leftover rain, but the air carried a sweetness she hadn't felt in months. She tucked her earbuds in and set off along the winding street lined with newly blossomed trees, her jacket just light enough to let the chill graze her skin. Halfway down the lane, Lena got that strange feeling, the one people often dismiss as imagination. She couldn't quite explain it, but her steps slowed as the awareness spread through her body. Someone was behind her. She didn't hear footsteps. She didn't hear breathing, but the silence itself pressed too heavily against her ears. Carefully, she glanced over her shoulder. Nothing, just swaying branches spilling petals onto the pavement. She shook her head, chuckled nervously at her paranoia, and continued walking, the music now feeling oddly invasive. The trees seemed different that night. Normally, Lena loved how the cherry blossoms created a soft pink canopy above the sidewalks, but under the dim street lamps, the blossoms seemed to swallow the light, casting irregular shadows across the pavement. She thought she saw one of the shadows move. Her body froze mid-step, but when she blinked, it was gone. A flicker of dread snuck into her chest. She considered cutting her walk short, but convinced herself she was being dramatic. Still, she tugged out her earbuds. Silence felt safer now. That's when she heard it. A sharp, deliberate snap of a twig. Not ahead, not to the side, directly behind her. Lena's pulse surged. She turned again, scanning the path, her breath shallow. Nothing. The empty sidewalk stretched endlessly, framed by the restless blossoms. She forced herself to laugh, muttering, "Rabbits, probably just a rabbit." But her laugh sounded brittle, breaking too quickly. This time, she didn't put the earbuds back in. She needed her ears as Lena quickened her pace. A soft wind stirred, sending petals raining down across her shoulders. They clung to her hair and jacket like fragile fingerprints. She brushed them off quickly, but when she looked down at the ground, she realized there were more petals than there should have been, piled thickly in a perfect circle around her feet. Her breath hitched, and she stepped backward out of the strange ring. That's when she saw it. Halfway between the trees, nearly hidden among the blossoms, a tall figure stood. Still, watching. The blossoms swirled around him, but he did not move. Lena's throat tightened as she locked eyes, or at least, she thought she locked eyes, with the figure between the trees. Its face was shadowed, completely obscured beneath the veil of petals and branches. For a frozen moment, neither of them moved. The only sound was the faint hiss of wind rattling the blossoms. Then, as though acknowledging her stare, the figure shifted ever so slightly, tilting its head to one side. That tiny movement ripped through Lena's chest like a blade. She stumbled backward, her sneakers scraping against wet pavement. Her mind raced. Should she scream? Run? Call someone? But her voice felt stuck behind her teeth, and her body refused to obey. The petals continued to fall, thicker now, caught in her hair, clinging to her eyelashes. She swiped them away frantically, blinking hard. When she opened her eyes again, the figure was gone. Just gone. No sound of retreat, no crunch of footsteps, only silence and the strangely suffocating aroma of blossoms. Lena spun in circles, desperate to catch sight of movement. Her ears strained, searching for any hint of breath, a shift of fabric, anything. But the street remained empty. She wanted to run home immediately, but curiosity tugged at her like cruel fingers. What if it was a neighbor? A prank? Someone injured, maybe? Against every screaming instinct in her head, she crept closer to the spot where the figure had been standing. Her sneakers pressed against damp grass at the tree's base. There, half buried beneath petals, was something small and metallic glinting under the lamplight. She crouched down, brushing away the delicate pink fragments until her hand closed around it. A pocket watch. Heavy. Old. The surface was scratched but engraved with a floral design that almost mirrored the blossoms around her. When she pressed the clasp, it clicked open, revealing a faded black and white photograph inside. A woman, standing in the very same street, beneath the very same blossoms, though the picture looked decades old. Her smile was soft, her dress from another era. Scrawled beneath the image in faint handwriting were the words, "Forever watched." Lena's skin went cold. She shoved the watch into her pocket without thinking, her only instinct now to get away. But as she turned, a sound froze her blood. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching on gravel. This time, they weren't behind her. They were above. Lena tilted her head back, just as petals rained heavily from the branches. Perched high in the cherry blossom tree, half hidden among the flowers, was the figure, its head still tilted, unmoving, watching her from above. Lena's scream never came. It jammed in her throat as her eyes locked with the figure crouched in the branches above. Its limbs seemed too long, bent awkwardly, yet perfectly balanced as if it had always belonged among the blossoms. For one horrifying moment, Lena thought it smiled, not with lips, but with the faint widening of pale, gleaming eyes that reflected the weak street lamp. Her legs finally remembered how to move, and she bolted down the street, petals swirling around her ankles like frantic whispers urging her to run faster. She didn't dare look back. Every instinct told her that if she looked, if she slowed down, it would be right there behind her. The neighborhood blurred in streaks of pink and gray until she reached her own front gate. Fumbling with the latch, her hands slick with sweat, she nearly dropped it before forcing her way inside. She slammed the door shut, chest heaving, pressing her back against the wood as though the thin barrier could keep the world out. The house was silent. Safe. Or so she told herself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. With shaking hands, she pulled it out. A text message glowed on the screen, an unknown number. The message was only 2 words, "Beautiful blossoms." A chill iced down her spine. She dropped the phone on the couch, backing away like it had bitten her. She hadn't told anyone she was going for a walk. She hadn't spoken to anyone on the street. How could anyone know? Unless the watcher wasn't just in the trees. He was closer than she realized. The pocket watch weighed heavily in her jacket, as if burning through the fabric. She pulled it out again, staring at the old photo. This time, she noticed something she had missed before. In the corner of the faded picture, just behind the smiling woman, was the faint outline of the same figure. The same tilt of the head. The same unnatural stillness. Her stomach dropped. This thing had been here for decades. Watching. Waiting. Preserving itself in the blossoms like an eternal curse. That's when she heard it. Softly, faintly, but unmistakable. The sound of petals brushing against glass. Lena turned slowly toward her living room window. Beyond the glass, pressed close enough that the blossoms fogged against the pane, was the figure. No branches to hide him now. Just a long, still form, eyes glinting through the veil of drifting petals. And this time, there was no mistaking it. He was smiling. Lena staggered backward from the window, her heart hammering so violently she thought her chest might give way. The watcher did not move. His face pressed so close against the glass that the blossoms clinging to him smeared against it, as though they bled into the pane itself. The smile lingered, stretched not by lips, but by some dreadful satisfaction. She tried to scream, but only a choked sound came out, pitiful and small. Grabbing her phone from the couch, she fumbled to dial 911, but the screen flickered, went black, and then lit again. A new message appeared from the same number. "You looked at me. Now I can come closer." The phone clattered to the floor as Lena gasped, staring at the words. Against every rational thought, she dared a glance back at the window. The watcher was gone. Petals, however, still clung wetly to the glass, their arrangement eerily deliberate, as though forming the faint shape of a hand pressed there only moments ago. She stumbled into the kitchen, locking every door, every window, pulling curtains tight. But the air inside already felt wrong. Too sweet, too heavy, like springtime rotting. She turned on every light she could, hoping brightness might keep the shadows at bay. Her trembling hands found the pocket watch again, and she opened it like it might offer some answer. But the photograph inside had changed. The smiling woman was no longer alone. Behind her, the watcher now stood fully in frame, taller, clearer, as if his presence had grown stronger simply by being acknowledged. Lena's stomach twisted. The message made sense now. Looking at him didn't just give him power. It invited him closer. A floorboard creaked above her. Lena froze, eyes darting toward the ceiling. She lived alone. No one should be upstairs. The air grew thick, heavy, until it seemed every breath took effort. Slowly, she reached for the largest kitchen knife she owned, her knuckles white as she clutched it. The creak came again, closer to the top of the stairs. Then a soft rain of petals drifted down from the ceiling vent above, scattering across the counter. Lena's knees weakened, and the knife nearly slipped from her grip. Gathering every scrap of courage, she edged toward the staircase. The lights overhead flickered violently, plunging the hall into strobe-like flashes of dark and light. At the top of the stairs, in one blinding instant of illumination, she saw him, standing perfectly still, his elongated frame silhouetted against the hallway wall. His head tilted, blossoms pouring steadily from his hair and shoulders, littering the carpet. When the lights flickered again, the hall was empty. But the petals still fell, drifting down toward her like a silent countdown. The silence in the house was unbearable, stretched so tight it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lena gripped the knife tighter, her hands slick with sweat, her eyes fixed on the staircase. Petals continued to drift down lazily from above, a soft snowfall of pink and white that felt mockingly gentle in contrast to the dread clawing at her stomach. She tried to convince herself she'd imagined the figure, just a trick of flickering lights. But deep down, she knew better. She felt him here, summoning her courage. She crept up the stairs one slow step at a time, the wood groaning beneath her weight. Her breaths came shallow, each exhale clouding the air as if the house had suddenly dropped in temperature. Halfway up, she stopped. The sound of whispering brushed past her ears. Not words exactly, more like petals rustling, layered and soft, yet undeniably aimed at her. She pressed her hands to her ears, but the whispers came from inside, swelling louder until her head ached. She forced herself upward, teeth clenched, knife raised. The upstairs hallway stretched long and dim, the overhead lights swinging weakly on its cord. Petals carpeted the floor, curling under the doorframes of rooms that should have been empty. But one door was open, her bedroom. The whispers quieted the moment she looked at it, as though waiting for her next move. Her body trembled with resistance, but her feet betrayed her, carrying her to the threshold. The scent of blossoms was overwhelming now, syrupy and cloying. She stepped inside. The room was almost unrecognizable. Blossoms layered the walls, clinging like wet paper. Piles of petals covered her bed, spilling onto the floor, gathering in drifts as though the room itself were blooming. And in the center of it all, standing perfectly still, was the Watcher. His frame was taller now, filling nearly the full height of the ceiling, petals cascading endlessly from his shoulders. His head tilted slowly to meet her gaze, his smile sharp and wrong, stretching far beyond what a human face should allow. Lena raised the knife, her voice finally breaking free in a ragged scream. "Stay away from me." The Watcher did not flinch. Instead, he lifted one impossibly long arm and extended it toward her, petals streaming from his fingertips. The pocket watch in her hand snapped open on its own, the photograph inside changing yet again. This time, it wasn't the smiling woman. It was her, Lena, standing in her bedroom, blossoms surrounding her just as they did now. And behind her, blurred but unmistakable, the Watcher loomed closer, his hand reaching out exactly as he was in this moment. Lena's arm trembled as she held the knife forward, her pulse hammering in her throat. The Watcher did not advance, though his outstretched hand seemed to stretch further every second, blossoms falling like tiny shreds of flesh from his fingers. The photograph inside the pocket watch glowed faintly, almost pulsing, as though alive. She wanted to throw it, to smash it, but her fingers wouldn't obey. Her grip was locked, controlled by something outside her will. Then the whispers returned. Not outside this time, not even inside her ears. They were inside her thoughts, threading through her memories. Words formed, hushed yet sharp. They all looked. They all let me in. Lena staggered backward, clutching her head. Images crashed against her skull, faded scenes of strangers she'd never met. Men and women standing beneath blossoms across different decades, each staring up at the Watcher with hollow eyes, each fading into photographs just like the one in her hand. One by one, they vanished, consumed, their faces etched into the endless cycle of spring. She gasped and dropped to her knees, trying to shut it out, but the room itself seemed to breathe. The blossoms on the walls shifted, their petals fluttering though no wind stirred. They formed shapes, faces pressed against the surface, mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with terror. Lena scrambled backward, but the faces followed her, pressing outward as if desperate to escape, only to dissolve back into the blossoms. They weren't decorations. They were remnants. The watcher stepped forward then, his movement slow but inevitable, petals pooling thick around his feet. Lena's knife felt useless in her hand, laughable against something that bent reality. She swung wildly anyway, slashing the air. For a split second, she thought she'd struck him. His body flickered, his head jerking to the side. But instead of blood, a rain of blossoms burst from the wound, filling the air, blinding her. When she blinked the petals away, the watcher was gone. Silence crashed into the room. The blossoms stopped falling. The faces in the walls stilled. Lena was alone, kneeling on the petal-covered floor, chest heaving. The knife shook in her hand, the pocket watch still glowing faintly in the other. Relief began to creep in, shaky, fragile, but real, until she looked at the photograph again. The image had changed. It showed her bedroom, empty this time, no watcher in sight. But in the reflection of the mirror on her dresser, she saw herself, fast asleep in her bed, her own body lying there vulnerable, while the watcher stood at her side, watching. The photograph burned in Lena's hand, its glow brighter with each passing second. She wanted to throw it, destroy it, but when she tried, her hand refused to move. Her body wasn't entirely her own anymore. Her pulse pounded in her ears as her eyes lingered on the image. Herself, lying asleep in bed, the watcher looming nearby. The longer she stared, the heavier her eyelids became. Her vision blurred, colors bleeding into one another, until she felt herself sinking. When her eyes snapped open, she was in her bed. The room was quiet, the blossoms gone, the walls bare. Sunlight streamed through the window, painting the floor in pale gold. Relief rushed through her chest like cool water. It had been a nightmare, a horrifyingly vivid nightmare. She reached to her nightstand for her phone, her voice breaking with a relieved laugh. But when her hand touched the wood, petals scattered under her fingertips. She froze. Slowly, she turned her head. The blossoms were back, thicker than before. They poured from the ceiling, spilled from the vents, cascaded from beneath her bedsheets. They weren't just covering the room. They were growing from it, pulsing as though alive. The air grew damp and heavy, suffocating. She kicked free of the sheets, her feet sinking into the petal-draped floor like it was mud. The sweet smell turned rancid, cloying like spoiled fruit. She gagged, stumbling forward, but every step pulled her deeper. Then came the voice. Not whispers this time, but a low, steady tone that vibrated inside her chest. Spring returns. So do I. Her head snapped toward the mirror across the room. The reflection didn't match. While she struggled and gasped among the blossoms, her reflection lay calmly in bed, eyes closed, the watcher standing at her side like a sentinel. He lifted his long arm, brushing her reflection's hair tenderly, mockingly, while in reality Lena's body convulsed against invisible weight pressing down on her. Desperation clawed at her. She raised the knife, screaming, and plunged it into her own thigh. Pain ripped through her body like lightning, and with it, the illusion shattered. The blossoms vanished. The room snapped back into dim lamplight, and she was on the floor, bleeding, trembling, her knife slick with her own blood. But the pocket watch still glowed where it had fallen, its photograph unchanged, her reflection, asleep, the watcher still there, watching. And with a dreadful certainty, Lena realized the truth. Stabbing herself hadn't freed her. It had only proven she was still caught in his cycle, neither fully awake nor fully dreaming. Lena pressed her trembling hand against her bleeding thigh, gasping through clenched teeth. The pain was real, too real. Yet the shifting images around her made reality impossible to anchor. The pocket watch lay on the floor, glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Every pulse released a faint flutter of petals that dissolved into the air. She forced herself to crawl toward it, knife dragging behind her, each inch a battle against the weakness overtaking her. When she touched the watch, her head filled with visions, not just fragments this time, but entire lifetimes flashing before her eyes. Decades of springtime nights, women walking under cherry blossoms, men pausing beneath blooming branches, all of them turning their heads at the wrong moment, looking too long, meeting the watcher's gaze. Each face etched into the blossoms, absorbed into the cycle, repeating year after year. She saw the smiling woman from the first photograph. She saw families she'd never known. And finally, she saw herself, standing where she was now, blood on her leg, knife in hand, trapped like the rest. The voice returned, stronger than before, rattling the walls, echoing through her bones. Spring is renewal. Spring is return. You looked. You belong. Blossoms erupted from the floorboards, splitting the wood, roots twisting upward like skeletal hands. The watcher stepped through the breach, towering, his form stretching unnaturally until his head brushed the ceiling. His eyes burned faintly, glowing like pale lanterns. He no longer hid among blossoms. He was the blossoms, their keeper, their prison. Lena screamed, forcing herself upright, her knife shaking in her grip. She slashed wildly, cutting through petals, through roots, through shadows. Each strike scattered blossoms into the air, but none of them touched him. He moved closer, slow and deliberate, his smile wider now, impossibly wide, splitting the stillness with cruel serenity. Every step he took made the air heavier, harder to breathe, until Lena felt she was suffocating inside her own home. Her gaze fell to the watch again. If it was the key to the curse, maybe it could also break it. Desperation lit her veins. She raised the knife, ready to smash the glowing face. But before she could strike, the watcher's hand shot forward, long, pale, impossibly fast, closing around her wrist. The blossoms around them roared like a storm, rattling the windows. His touch was ice, draining, pulling something vital out of her. And for the first time, he spoke directly, his words shaping the silence. Destroy it, and you remain with me forever. The watcher's grip burned cold into Lena's wrist, freezing her bones until the knife trembled loose from her hand and clattered into the blossoms below. The sound was swallowed instantly, muffled as though the petals themselves had devoured it. She screamed, twisting, kicking, but his hold didn't falter. His smile widened, stretching impossibly across his face, his tilted head lowering until his eyes locked with hers. In them, she saw not a reflection, but an endless cycle of nights like this one. Faces staring back at him across generations, each one consumed. With her free hand, Lena clawed at his arm, desperate. Her nails scraped away petals, and for the first time, she felt something beneath. Rough, bark-like, ancient. He wasn't flesh. He was rooted, eternal, as much a part of the trees as the blossoms themselves. The realization nearly broke her. How do you fight something that isn't alive? But still, she refused to stop struggling. Her gaze flicked back to the glowing pocket watch on the floor. It pulsed brighter now, synchronized with her own heartbeat, as though it fed on her fear. The watcher's words echoed again. Destroy it, and you remain with me forever. She understood then. The watch wasn't just a key, it was a chain. It held the cycle, preserved the faces, trapped them in endless spring. And maybe, just maybe, destroying it could end the curse, or bind her more tightly than ever. Summoning every shred of strength, she wrenched free just long enough to dive for the watch. Pain ripped through her thigh, her body screaming in protest, but she forced herself onward. Her fingers closed around it, and before the watcher could reclaim her wrist, she raised the glowing face high. You won't have me, she shouted, slamming it against the floor with all her strength. The glass shattered. A blinding burst of white light exploded through the room, hurling blossoms into the air like a cyclone. The watcher shrieked, his voice a sound of splintering wood and tearing earth. His form convulsed, unraveling into a storm of petals that whipped violently around her, cutting her skin like paper knives. The walls shook. The ceiling cracked. For a moment, Lena believed she had done it, that she had broken him, broken the cycle. But then, amid the chaos, she saw them. Faces in the blossoms, hundreds of them, screaming in silence as they spun around her. And among them, faint but clear, was her own. The cyclone of blossoms screamed around Lena, cutting at her skin, burning her lungs as she tried to breathe. Her arms flailed uselessly against the storm, her voice swallowed whole by the roar. The shattered watch pulsed one final time, then went dark, its glow extinguished like a snuffed flame. For a heartbeat, silence followed. The watcher's form was gone, unraveled into nothing but drifting petals. Relief sparked in her chest, fragile, desperate. Then the petals began to fall. Slowly, softly, like the start of spring rain. They covered the floor, her arms, her hair. At first, they seemed harmless, but when she brushed at them, they clung like wet fabric. She stumbled backward, but more fell, layering over her face, her chest, her legs. Each petal pressed heavy, suffocating, as though trying to bury her alive. She clawed at them, gasping for air, but the weight grew unbearable. Beneath the suffocating bloom, she screamed, yet no sound escaped. Her vision dimmed, narrowing to slivers of flickering light. Just before darkness took her, she saw them again. The faces, not in the air this time, but all around her, pressed against the petals, smothering her body, their eyes wide, mouths open in silent terror. They weren't trying to scare her. They were welcoming her, pulling her down, making space among their endless crowd. Her own reflection from the photograph smiled faintly at her, lips parting as if to whisper, "Spring returns. So do we." When the room fell still, there was nothing left of Lena. Only a thick carpet of cherry blossoms scattered across the bed, the floor, the walls. The knife lay buried beneath them. The broken watch rested silently in their folds, its glass shattered, its photo blank now. Outside the house, the blossoms on the trees swayed gently in the night breeze, pale and beautiful, whispering in the silence. To anyone passing by, the street looked peaceful, untouched. But if someone stopped beneath those trees, if they lingered too long, they might notice the blossoms weren't just blossoms at all. Some petals carried faint imprints of faces. One of them was Lena's, her wide eyes peering out, her lips frozen in a scream. Waiting, watching, as spring always demanded.